ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that there are moments in General Hospital when truth does not arrive as a revelation, but as a slow, suffocating collapse of everything once believed to be certain. And the unraveling of Nathan's identity is shaping into exactly that kind of storm, one that does not explode all at once, but instead tightens its grip with every uneasy glance, every unanswered question, every instinct that something is deeply wrong. What once appeared to be a miraculous return has gradually transformed into a psychological maze, where the man everyone calls Nathan no longer fits the memories people cling to, and the dissonance between who he was and who he has become begins to feel less like trauma and more like substitution. The possibility that Nathan is not truly Nathan, that the man walking through Port Charles is in fact the long-presumed dead twin, is not just a twist of identity but a fracture that cuts through every relationship tied to him, turning love into doubt and familiarity into danger. At the center of this unraveling stands Liesl, a woman who has spent years navigating between brilliance and moral ambiguity, yet even she appears unsettled by the shadows resurfacing from her past. Her return does not bring comfort, it brings questions, and more dangerously, it brings recognition. There is something in the way she studies Nathan now, something calculated beneath the maternal concern, as though she is not simply observing him, but measuring him against a truth she has tried for years to bury. The memories she once suppressed, memories of a birth clouded in secrecy, of loss that may not have been what it seemed, are no longer dormant. They are rising, fragment by fragment, forming a narrative that threatens to expose not only Nathan's reality, but her own complicity in a lie that has stretched across decades. Liesl's internal conflict is not just about what she might discover, but about whether she can survive the consequences of finally admitting what she has always suspected. For Maxie, the emotional stakes are far more immediate and devastating. Her connection to Nathan was never rooted in logic, but in trust, in the quiet belief that love could remain stable even in a world as volatile as Port Charles. That belief is now being dismantled piece by piece. She senses the difference before she understands it, noticing the subtle shifts in tone, the unfamiliar reactions, the absence of something she cannot quite name. What makes this unraveling so painful is that it does not come with clear proof. It comes with instinct, and instinct is harder to defend. Maxie is forced into a position where her heart is telling her something is wrong, while her mind desperately searches for reasons to deny it. The possibility that the man she has opened herself to is not who he claims to be is not just frightening, it is destabilizing, because it forces her to question her own perception of reality. And in a place where manipulation is always lurking beneath the surface, that kind of doubt can be weaponized. Lulu finds herself pulled into the same orbit of uncertainty, but her role is even more precarious. Where Maxie struggles with emotional recognition, Lulu becomes entangled in behavioral inconsistencies, moments where Nathan's actions do not align with the history they share. There is a growing tension in her interactions with him, a quiet realization that familiarity can be mimicked but not perfectly replicated. Lulu begins to see patterns, small fractures that suggest intention rather than accident, and with that realization comes fear. If this man is not Nathan, then who is he? And more importantly, what does he want? Her attempts to piece together the truth place her directly in danger, because the closer she gets to understanding, the more she becomes a threat to the illusion being maintained. And at the core of that illusion lies the most disturbing possibility of all, that the real Nathan is gone, and that his identity has been deliberately assumed by someone who has been conditioned, manipulated, or even controlled into playing a role. The idea of a twin, once dismissed as a tragic footnote in Liesl's past, now becomes the central axis of the mystery. If that twin survived, if he was hidden, reshaped, and eventually placed into Nathan's life, then every interaction, every memory, every emotional connection becomes suspect. This is not just a case of mistaken identity, it is a constructed reality, one designed to infiltrate and destabilize from within. And the implications of that are far-reaching, because it suggests that Nathan himself may not be acting out of free will, but as part of a larger, darker design. What makes the situation even more volatile is the possibility that the man impersonating Nathan is not entirely aware of his own deception. There are moments where his behavior suggests internal conflict, flashes of confusion that break through the controlled exterior. It is as though two identities are struggling for dominance, the imposed persona clashing with fragments of a suppressed self. This creates a tension that is both psychological and dangerous, because it means that the threat he poses is unpredictable. He is not simply a villain executing a plan. He is a fractured individual caught between programming and instinct, between what he has been told to be and what he might actually be. And that instability makes him capable of actions that even he may not fully understand. Liesl's growing awareness of this duality forces her into a position where she must confront not only the truth about Nathan, but also the truth about herself. If she was involved in the circumstances that led to the twins' disappearance, if she played a role in shaping the conditions that allowed this deception to occur, then her guilt becomes inseparable from the present crisis. Her attempts to uncover the truth are therefore not purely investigative. They are also redemptive, a desperate effort to correct a mistake that may have already cost too much. Yet, redemption in Port Charles is never simple, and the more she uncovers, the more she risks exposing a past that could destroy what little stability remains. As the tension builds, the danger surrounding Maxie and Lulu intensifies. They are no longer just observers of a mystery. They are participants in a narrative that is closing in on them. The man they are trying to understand is also the man who could silence them if they get too close. This creates a suffocating atmosphere where every interaction carries the weight of potential betrayal, where trust becomes a liability rather than a comfort. The emotional stakes are matched by physical risk, and the line between psychological manipulation and outright threat begins to blur. What emerges from this unfolding story is not just a question of identity, but a meditation on control, on how easily a life can be rewritten when truth is obscured and memory is manipulated. Nathan, or the man believed to be Nathan, becomes the embodiment of that theme, a figure caught between authenticity and fabrication, between the life he is living and the one that may have been stolen from someone else. His internal struggle, whether fully conscious or not, adds a layer of tragedy to the narrative, because it suggests that even he may be a victim of the same forces that are endangering everyone around him. And yet, beneath all of this complexity, there is a simple, devastating truth waiting to be uncovered. If the twin is real, if the substitution has been deliberate, then the story is not just about deception, but about loss, about the erasure of one life to sustain the illusion of another. That is the kind of revelation that does not just shock, it reshapes everything that came before it. It forces every character to reevaluate their choices, their relationships, and their understanding of reality itself. As Liesl moves closer to confronting what she has long avoided, and as Maxie and Lulu edge toward a truth that could put them in direct danger, the narrative reaches a point where resolution is no longer optional. Something will break. The illusion cannot hold forever, and when it collapses, it will not do so quietly. It will expose secrets, destroy trust, and leave behind a reality that is far more complicated and far more painful than anyone was prepared to face. In that moment, the question will no longer be who Nathan is, but what remains of everyone who believed in him once the truth finally comes to light. There are times in Port Charles when desperation does not look like panic but like precision, and that is exactly where Liesl finds herself now, moving with a calculated urgency that hides the emotional storm threatening to consume her. For all her past coldness and control, this moment strips everything down to something far more primal, a mother fighting against forces she can neither fully see nor completely understand, knowing that every second she hesitates could cost her both Nathan and Britt. What makes her situation even more dangerous is not simply the scale of the threat surrounding them, but the realization that any move she makes to protect them may also expose them further, drawing attention from enemies who thrive on vulnerability. Liesl understands better than anyone that Nathan's situation is no longer just a personal crisis, but part of a larger, darker mechanism, one that has been quietly manipulating identities, rewriting truths, and placing people exactly where they can be controlled. The suspicion that Nathan is not entirely himself, that he may be caught in a web of conditioning or substitution, forces her to confront the possibility that saving him is not just about extracting him from danger, but about breaking something that has been deliberately constructed. At the same time, Britt's involvement complicates everything. Britt is no longer just a daughter who needs protection. She is a key piece in a puzzle that others may already be trying to solve, whether she realizes it or not. The more Britt gets pulled into Nathan's unraveling reality, the more she becomes a target. That is why Liesl does something she rarely allows herself to do. She reaches outward. Turning to Nina is not simply a strategic decision. It is an admission that this battle cannot be fought alone. Nina represents something Liesl has often resisted: connection, unpredictability, emotional instinct, but in a situation like this, those very qualities become essential. Nina's involvement creates a new axis of support, one that extends beyond calculation and into loyalty, into the kind of protection that comes from people who refuse to stand aside when someone they care about is in danger. This alliance begins to ripple outward, pulling in others who may not fully understand the depth of the threat, but who recognize the urgency in Liesl's actions. What starts as a desperate attempt to protect two people quickly evolves into something larger, a network of resistance against an unseen enemy. and that enemy is not passive. Cullum and Sidwell have built their influence on control, on the ability to manipulate events without ever stepping into the light. Their plans are not designed to withstand confrontation, but to avoid it entirely, to remain hidden while others unknowingly carry out their will. What Liesl is doing, forming connections, asking questions, disrupting patterns, is the exact kind of interference that threatens to expose everything they have constructed. Each step she takes, each ally she gains, chips away at the stability of their operation. It introduces unpredictability into a system that depends on precision, and that alone is enough to make them react. Yet the more pressure Liesl applies, the more dangerous the situation becomes. Cullum and Sidwell are not the kind of enemies who retreat quietly. They escalate. The moment they sense that their control is slipping, they will tighten their grip not just on Nathan, but on anyone connected to him. This is where the emotional stakes transform into something far more immediate. Maxie, Lulu, Britt, even Nina, all of them become potential leverage, pieces to be used in a game that is no longer hidden beneath layers of subtlety. The threat is no longer abstract, it is personal, direct, and imminent. What makes Liesl's position so precarious is that she is fully aware of this escalation and chooses to move forward anyway. That choice reveals something essential about her character. For years, Liesl has operated within morally ambiguous spaces, often prioritizing intellect over emotion, strategy over connection. But now, faced with the possibility of losing everything that still matters to her, she abandons the illusion of control she once relied on. She is no longer trying to outmaneuver the system from within, she is actively trying to break it, even if that means exposing herself in the process. There is a quiet intensity in the way she navigates this conflict, a recognition that the truth about Nathan, about who he really is, about what has been done to him, may be the key to unraveling everything. If the theory of the twin is real, if the man they are dealing with is both victim and weapon, then freeing him is not just an act of rescue, but an act of defiance against the entire structure Cullum and Sidwell have built. And that defiance carries consequences. Because once the illusion begins to crack, it cannot be contained. Secrets bleed outward, identities collapse, and the carefully maintained balance of power begins to shift. At the same time, there is an emotional cost that cannot be ignored. Liesl is not just fighting an external enemy, she is confronting the weight of her own past decisions, the possibility that her silence, her choices, may have contributed to the very situation she is now trying to undo. That internal conflict adds a layer of urgency to everything she does, because this is no longer just about saving Nathan and Britt, it is about correcting something that should never have been allowed to happen in the first place. As the connections between Liesl, Nina, and the others grow stronger, so does the sense that something inevitable is approaching. The plans of Cullum and Sidwell, once untouchable, are beginning to fracture under the pressure of exposure. Their control is no longer absolute, their secrecy no longer secure. And while that might suggest victory, it also signals the most dangerous phase of the conflict, the moment when those who have been operating in the shadows are forced into the open. What lies ahead is not a simple resolution, but a collision. Liesl's determination, Nina's loyalty, Britt's resilience, and Nathan's fractured identity are all converging toward a point where truth can no longer be hidden. And when that moment comes, it will not just dismantle the plans of Cullum and Sidwell, it will redefine the lives of everyone involved. Because in Port Charles, when the truth finally surfaces, it does not restore order, it transforms it.